Woodstock. When you hear that word, what do you think of? You probably think of peace, or love, flowers, 500,000 young people dancing in the mud. You think of the most beautiful, most innocent moment in music history and the paradise of a generation. This is the story everyone knows, and this story is not quite true. Because behind the curtain of that paradise was something else entirely. There was chaos, there was danger, there was hunger, mud, death, and catastrophe. It came back from the edge of being canceled twice. It could not feed or protect 500,000 people. It brought the 4 young men who organized it to the brink of bankruptcy. And in those famous 3 days, far darker things happened than anyone imagines. Today, on the anniversary of the day Woodstock began, August 15th, we're going to tell you the truth behind the legend. We'll tell you how that supposed paradise was really a struggle for survival. In this video, you'll hear the untold stories of Woodstock. If you've brought your memories and your coffee, and if you've subscribed, we're beginning. It all began in 1969 with the dream of 4 young men. They were all in their 20s. They had a dream of putting on a huge music festival, but that dream began to crack from the very first day. First, they lost the site where the festival was to be held. The permit for the land they had planned was canceled at the last moment. The festival came to the edge of being canceled twice before it even began. In desperation, they found a solution at the last minute. A dairy farmer named Max Yasgur opened up his 600-acre field to them. The festival was saved, but now they had to plan and build everything from scratch in just a few days. So there was no time. There were not enough entrance gates. There were no proper fences, toilets, water, medical services. None of it was enough. The roads were in no condition to carry this many people. The organizers had to make a choice. Either they would handle security and the ticketing system, or they would finish the stage. And yes, they chose the stage. This was the decision that sealed their fate, because the stage was ready. But the rest of the festival was preparing for a total disaster. The organizers expected 200,000 people at most, but the reality was far beyond their imagination. People began to arrive in waves, and they didn't stop coming. Hundreds of thousands of young people from every corner of the country poured into that little farm. The number passed 200,000, then 300,000, then 400,000. By some estimates, 500,000 people filled that field, and the system collapsed before the festival even began. There were not enough staff to collect tickets. The fences were so flimsy that the crowd tore them down easily, and in an instant, 500,000 people flooded in. And most of them had jumped those fences for free. In that moment, Woodstock stopped being a paid festival. It was now a giant organism, uncontrollable, growing on its own. The roads locked up completely. Miles-long lines of vehicles formed. So much so that even some of the artists who were supposed to play couldn't get in. They had to be flown in by helicopter. And in the middle of this enormous crowd, a fundamental problem emerged. There was not enough food, water, or shelter for this many people. And on top of all this, the rain began, and that paradise turned into a swamp. One eyewitness describes those days like this: it was a swamp that sucked the shoes right off your feet. It wasn't just mud, it was mixed with cow manure, and it was so dark it looked like chocolate. 500,000 people stayed for days in this mud, in that swamp that to some looked like chocolate. Food ran out. Finding clean water was nearly impossible. The toilets were inadequate, and everything became unbearable. The Indian sitar master Ravi Shankar compared the muddy crowd he saw from the stage to the water buffaloes in his home country, and he summed up Woodstock in a single phrase: a terrifying experience. But the real danger was elsewhere. With the rain, the metal scaffolding around the stage became a threat. People had climbed those structures to see better. The organizers were terrified. If lightning struck, those metal frames could electrocute the entire crowd. And for the musicians, the journey was deadly too. Crosby, Stills, Nash, and Young, whom we told you about before, that band from our David Crosby video, nearly died in a helicopter accident on their way to Woodstock. Graham Nash and the band's drummer almost lost their lives trying to fly in by helicopter because the roads were closed. The place they called paradise was really a place that could turn into a tragedy at any moment. So while all of this was happening, what state were those 4 young organizers in? In a single word, ruin. When the festival was only a few hours old, they had already collapsed financially. Because once the fences came down and everyone got in for free, almost all of the ticket revenue had evaporated. Along with all of this, the costs, sadly, did not evaporate. On the contrary, they multiplied. And here, beneath that peace and love legend, was a much barer truth. Some famous artists, when they saw the chaos, demanded their money in cash before taking the stage. Peace and love were beautiful, but when it came to getting paid, everyone returned to reality. When the festival was over, those 4 young men were under an enormous debt. By some calculations, along with years of inflation, Woodstock lost around $10 million. The mountain of garbage that 500,000 people left behind took 2 weeks to clean up. But because the festival had gone bankrupt, even that cleanup crew couldn't be paid on time. That's how dire it was. The weekend everyone called paradise had turned into a total hell for the people who created it. So if everything was such a disaster, then why do we still remember Woodstock as a legend? Here is the truth. And this is the most surprising part of the story. Because despite all that chaos, despite the hunger, the mud, the danger, the collapse, those 500,000 people did not harm one another. No violence broke out. People fed each other, embraced each other, held onto each other, even in those terrible conditions. The media was expecting a catastrophe. There were discussions about whether to call in the National Guard. But what happened was something no one expected. Hundreds of thousands of people in the middle of the chaos chose peace. This was the real miracle of Woodstock. Not because it was a paradise, but because, even though it was a total disaster, people managed to stay human. Sadly, many of the legends who played on that stage are no longer with us. Jimi Hendrix, Janis Joplin, just 1 year after Woodstock, both left this world at the age of 27. That stage was full of so many voices we have lost. Woodstock was not perfect. It was never a paradise. But maybe that is exactly why it was so human, so real, so unforgettable. Now let's bring the same scenario to today. Imagine a crazy project like Woodstock beginning today, on August 15th, 2026, with the same difficulties, the same chaos, the same hardships. Do you think that today 500,000 people could stay human in that swamp, sharing resources without harming one another? You give the answer. August 15th, the day Woodstock was born. We remember those 3 days and all those voices on that stage. If our work earns your appreciation, please show us by liking this video and subscribing to our channel. We need your support. We're so glad you're here. See you in the next video.